staff, and welcome to any of our visitors that are here as well. Welcome to you. A reminder that mobile phones, switch them off if you can, because it does interfere with our recording system. Just a reminder, we are on air, and we welcome those that may be listening at home or in the office or in the car, wherever they may be listening. Welcome to you as well. And trust we have a good meeting, so please be seated. Thank you. I have one apology from Councillor Dakin. Declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? There's three. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 14.2, specifically item 2, Encore Theatre Company's production of Jersey Boys.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
9.1, 9.3 and 14.1, specifically the Council.
9.1, 9.3 and?
14.1, specifically the Council.
Just so that they've got that, the staff? Yeah. Thank you. And Councillor Harris.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Item 14.2, major event sponsorship, round 1.
Thank you. Any other declaration of interest? No, thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Somebody happy to move the minutes held on the 19th of May. Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Council workshops. The workshop reports are there. Somebody happy to move that? Councillor Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to a deputy?
Super briefly, Mayor, just wanted to point out that it was great to receive a deputation from Visit Northern Tasmania. As councillors are aware, a significant budget line is our contribution to that regional organisation, and I think it would be fair to say that the standard of the delivery during the last 12 months and the aspirational plan for the next 12 was absolutely outstanding. And credit to Chris and the team from Visit Northern Tasmania. What I'm looking forward to specifically is that alignment between our own council tourism strategy and that we're funding as part of the regional body. So it was really impressive to have that 45-minute presentation, and we look forward to working together collaboratively, perhaps like we never have before, with regard to getting the best out of our input into that organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So then we'll move on to item 6. I'll let it go into closed council. Council's leave of absence. 7.1. Is James Riggle here from Bitlink? Welcome, James. Come to the microphone. That's it.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor, for welcoming me, and hello, everybody. Hello, councillors. I've come along today to give a community report about my work at Bitlink. So I'm one of 2 directors of Bitlink. It's a local technology company that does a lot of technology education work. We had the great pleasure of giving a presentation to council a few months ago about a project that we have been working on to put Internet of Things education kits in Tasmanian primary schools. And what I wanted to do today was give you a bit of an update on how that project is going. We actually had some very good news just a couple of months ago. We entered a national competition that was held by NBN. It's called the Innovate with NBN competition. We entered the education category and were fortunate enough to win that. That was $10,000 into the business. We were also delighted to find that we were also selected as the Innovation Champions, which was another $25,000. And that is a national award that there was only one winner each year. So those are obviously very exciting things for our business. I wanted to just quickly let you know what we're doing with that funding. We're actually using that funding to take our kits to more regional primary schools in Tasmania. So we've just recently gone to Flinders Island, where we've donated a class set of our kits to Flinders Island Primary School, and also some kits to Cape Barren Island Primary School, which, as many of you are probably aware, is a very small school. And we will be heading to King Island shortly and donating a kit there as well. And we've got some plans to go further afield in Australia too. So that was the main thing that I wanted to share with you all today. I also wanted to just quickly say we've had the great pleasure of working with National Job Link recently on a program to support job seekers who are interested in technology and video game design. And I believe you will be hearing from Andrew Jones from NJL in a couple of weeks' time. So please do look forward to that report. That's another project that we've been very excited to be a part of. That's all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for the opportunity to let you know what we're up to.
Thank you, and congratulations on the award. Well done.
Thanks
Great
very much.
work. Thank you very much. So we now go to public question time. Questions on notice from the previous meeting are there. Any other questions from the public at this time without notice?
Chair, Ron Baines, Malunga Street, Kings Meadows. I read the council is considering a construction and demolition facility in order to divert material that's currently going to landfill and has been going there for 10 years that I'm aware of. How is this progressing?
Yeah, look, council is certainly very keen to get that up and running, and that's going to take some time. At the moment, we need to do a feasibility study, which will be about to start, and that should be we started next year, so that'll be done next year, the feasibility study, and then it'll progress from there.
All right, thank you. At present, I believe the Albert Hall entrance off Symmetry Street has 8 parking areas, plus 2 for disabled people. It seems that due to the refurbishment process, the 8 parking areas will be removed. Will another area be used for these 8 parking spots, or are they just going to disappear?
They are going to disappear according to the plan that was put to council.
So there's nowhere else for them?
Not on that site, no.
Okay. There are 2 disabled places
Is this
there.
your third question then?
This is part of that question.
No, one question and we move on. Thank you.
Okay. In this calendar year, how many projects have been contracted by the City Council without going to tender?
We'll have to take that on notice. I can't give you that answer now. That's a lot of work will need to go in to get that information. So that'll be answer will be hopefully in the next council agenda.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
Thank you, Robin Smith, on behalf of Coffee Republic, a business in Brisbane Street.
Just standing close to the mic for our recording. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those listening online.
At the end of this month, City Prom ceases to exist, and that, as I understand, is our, any size of business in the city, is our main advocacy and conduit contact with council and a number of other agencies. Council has taken the time to meet with any business interested, and I think an officer, Ranson, did explain to us the option in the future for any advocacy between business and council, particularly, is the SnapSend solved online system, or writing to council, or alternatively, council advised that we could join the Chamber of Commerce or another paid membership association. But unfortunately, none of that seems to have the level of advocacy that we enjoy at the moment. And for example, the Chamber of Commerce doesn't have any representation on the Launceston Safer Communities Partnership, to mention one of a number. Is council satisfied that the conduit between business and council is adequately catered for?
To my knowledge, we are, but I'm not sure if any council officer wants to add any more, but I think we're happy with the Chamber and the other City Prom and the work they do.
Question arises from the agenda item 9.1, a proposal to expand the existing car park at 41 Patterson Street, to add 206, by my calculations, I may be wrong, car park spaces to that, plus retail and accommodation. Just wondering, would the council runs 2 car parks in the same street? My understanding is that there are times when those 2 car parks are at capacity. They do become full at various times.
One of them is at capacity occasionally, the other one is not at a capacity very often at all, from my knowledge. So.
But it does meet it from time to time.
Well, Christmas time, obviously, it would be, yeah.
Thank you. With the same agenda item, there is a letter from a business close to this proposal, Maya, expressing concern about access to their loading dock. And I just want to get council's understanding that there may be a confusion between this proposal and one that Creative Developments had, which was for the bus interchange, which had some changes proposed, direction of traffic, etc. Is there anything that council sees in this proposal that would affect Maya's access to their loading dock? I can't see it, but I'm not a planner in the lane.
That matter will be discussed shortly by councillors, and that will come up if the councillors feel it as an issue. That will come up in the discussion. That's 3 questions. Thank you.
Well, also, I'd have a fourth if there's no one else, if I may.
Well, it better be quick.
This proposal, again, the same agenda item, it doesn't require the changes that the previous proposal did, which was to change the traffic network in Launceston, being Patterson Street directions and Charles Street, turning that into two-way. That's not required for this.
I don't think so, but that will be discussed by councillors. Thank you. Any further questions from the public? No? Thank you. So under the provision of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to the items included in agenda item 9. So we have 9.1. We do have 3 speakers here for 9.1. First, Ron Baines.
I'd like to reiterate my total support for the development application that relates to 41 to 45 Patterson Street, also commonly referred to as Birchwood Car Park. I'd like to commend Don Allen for his foresight and excellent commercial insight in what Launceston badly needs for this city, for this site, which doesn't include dozens of large buses which emit clouds of noxious gases to the detriment of any development of the old Birchwood building, its customers and staff. With excessive parking, I would suggest somebody talks to the people who are driving round in circles trying to find a space that is convenient and may wish to shop at a remodelled Birch's. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Curran.
Thank you. This project has been 14 years in the making. It was first approved with conditions in 2008. It had ground floor retail with 5 floors of parking and 429 parking spaces. In December 21, we submitted a new application for ground floor retail with car parking over 3 levels and 8 residential apartments. Paid a lodgement fee of $33,859 in December and advised that the application had become valid in January 22. It is 6 months to the day that this application was lodged. We have been advised that refusal is recommended by council officers. The basis of the refusal for this project is that under the planning scheme we've provided too many parking spaces. The existing site has 125 parking spaces on grade. Our rationale with the proposal was to replace the existing parking and then allocate additional parking based upon the use. Practical and sustainable, we thought, based upon our experience designing and developing buildings in Launceston for over 30 years. In line with modern thinking and car park design, the building was designed with additional height, floor to floor, to allow for future conversion of this building if car parking ever becomes redundant or commercially unviable. We were asked to justify our position. We thought we did, and we thought we had a practical and well-considered position based upon the spaces that would be required if we built anywhere outside of the CBD. We were advised that our position was unacceptable, did not meet the acceptable solution of the planning scheme, and that refusal of our application was recommended. Upon this advice, we revised our drawings and TIA to reflect a reduction of parking to 124, 1 less than the current position. 18 have been retained for the apartments and the balance of 106 to be available to the public. Essentially, the parking for the retail has been removed and replaced with an office space. We've been told by council officers that we would achieve recommendation of approval with this revised scheme now that we have met the acceptable solution, but the process does not allow us to do other than to submit a new application and re-advertise. We propose an alternative way forward, and we thought, and we have been advised by council that they do not wish to pursue this. Our advice is that our alternative way forward can be considered. The option given by council officers is that we submit a new application which involves going back to the beginning and commencing again, remembering we've already been in this process for 6 months. Okay. Yep, I do. We respectfully request that council votes to give us approval with conditions to allow us to achieve the position that I believe both parties have agreed to. Thank you.
Robin Smith, Coffee Republic.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I wholeheartedly support this proposal, and
Can you stand closer to the mic for those listening?
Yes, very well. To me, it's an anathema that the only opposition I can see to this is that there's too much parking, considering that most people in Launceston, the number one thing they ask for, more than toilets and more than a safer street, is car parking. Extraordinary. I just can't put words to explain how that could possibly be the reason for objection. I did hear that there is the option to convert that parking to retail if it became economic. It's a private enterprise and they can do what they want with it, but that's interesting to know that that's being built into it. And I am comfortable that there's no compromise that Council has and had a alternative proposal that this in effect is in competition with. And this does indeed gazump Council's proposal, and I understand it was a very significant proposal and Council's put a lot of time, but I do accept that I don't really think there's any kind of compromise, but the fact that this is being objected on car parking, I just don't know what the people of Launceston would make of it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have. Are there any other speakers for this item 9.1? Thank you. So somebody happy to move a motion? Councillor Stoward moved, seconded. Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Stoward?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and I want to start by thanking Mr Baines, Mr Curran and Mr Smith for their commentary and information, some of which I will touch on in my remarks. As we often say when we sit as a planning authority, we are bound to follow the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act, and again there's things that come to us as councillors, Mr Mayor, where community members like the three speakers and others email us, ring us, contact us with things within that application that they find particular support with. So I'm going to touch on some comments that Mr Smith made. If we walked around, I'd agree with him, if we walked around and spoke to people about this and increased parking, there would be perhaps a perception out there that that's a good thing, and I have raised that with councillors, that people contacted me with the same view as that promulgated by Mr Smith. But I think, with all respect, Mr Mayor, with that view, there's a bit of Bermuda Triangle, there's a bit of Yeti, there's a bit of abominable snowman about that one, because when you actually drill down into the data, it's a myth. People's view of adequate parking, with all respect of many people, is parking outside the shop that they want to shop at a particular time. I have people, Mr Mayor, that ring me and use language that I would not use in this chamber, and I have to hold my phone out and they say, I couldn't get a park. I'm paraphrasing. At 11:22 outside Target when I wanted to go in and grab something. And I happen to be in the city, wander around and see all these vacant car spaces. So, whilst I certainly acknowledge that people see that as an issue, there's a broader discussion to be had here, Mr Mayor. And again, I come back to what I said right at the very start. When we sit as a planning authority, we need to follow the rules. We need to follow the rules. Emotion doesn't come into it. Emotion doesn't come into it. We have to follow the rules. And I really appreciated the correspondence we've received over the week, and also in his submission today from Mr Curran, who spoke and took us through the history of this particular matter as handled by him. And he highlighted something, Mr Mayor, in his remarks today, where he talked about he had if you will, a potential solution, but the officer said to him that that was outside the process that we had to deal with today. And again, I do understand Mr Curran's frustration. What he's come up with is, for want of a better term, a compromise, an amendment, whatever you want to call it. But again, we're bound to follow a process. And that's the same process, Mr Mayor, we would follow if it was this particular site we're talking about or any other development application that we're dealing with around this table. So I do understand, with the significance of this site, it does evoke emotion and an opinion, and that's great. I think it's great that people want to contribute and participate. But in the papers in front of us, Mr Mayor, that we have to deal with today, and I will go to that in a moment on page 18 of our agenda, there is a very detailed recommendation that highlights why this is recommended for refusal today. It talks about non-compliance, and it talks about something called the Launceston Central Business District Parking Exemption Area, and it talks about the relevant clause in the interim planning scheme. All things, Mr Mayor, that we have to deal with and follow when we do business around this table and when we deal with matters in front of us. So, you know, I really look forward to other speakers in this discussion, but I do temper this argument, Mr Mayor, with the fact that we are working under what's in front of us. Emotion doesn't play a part in it. And again, like I said, I talk all the time, and people I'm sure get sick of me saying, as an old teacher, we need to educate the community about certain things. We have data, we have evidence, we have facts that talk about the fact that there isn't this enormous parking shortage in Launceston. Launceston is one of the most walkable cities, I hesitate to say the world. I know that you and others, Mr Mayor, always sing the praises of our wonderful city, and rightly so. But it's a very walkable city. And if you've got to park somewhere and walk 200 metres, by and large for most people that's doable. The people that ring me and talk about parking shortages, Mr Mayor, are angry because they can't park outside the shop or the coffee shop they want to stop in front of at 10:32 on a Monday. It's not about some huge deficit in parking. And you quite rightly, Mr Mayor, in response to Mr Smith's comment, highlighted that Christmas is busy. Well, take me anywhere in the world where Christmas isn't a busy shopping time. So there are other things at play. We've got a Tiger bus, for instance.
Councillor Sowell, your time's up. You'd like an extension?
A little extension, thank you.
Councillor Cox, seconded. Deputy Mayor, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. That's carried.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. But again, I highlight in that recommendation that is the very narrow thing that we need to work under today when we're sitting as a planning authority. It's got nothing to do with what happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or nasty phone calls we got about parking. That has got nothing to do with what's in front of us today. We have to make this decision based, and the recommendation is very, very clear, and it explains why that surplus parking is a problem, Mr Mayor. So I look forward to the discussion from councillors, but again, as I said, I remind all listening, we are sitting as a planning authority. The advice is there, the independent advice is there. It's very clear why we're refusing this, and again, you know, emotion has nothing to do with what's in front of us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sowell, for those opening remarks. As mentioned, the Launceston Central Business District Parking Exemption Area. Who knew such a thing existed? It's an area bounded by Chambers Street, William Street, Upper York, Elizabeth Street and Wellington Street. And in that area, we are asked not to add more parking spots than what there already are, to encourage our city to be a living city, a city that welcomes pedestrians and retail activity, because having cars circulating around the retail areas doesn't actually add to the amenity of the area. And as someone said, you don't spend any dollars when you're sitting on your wallet in your car. You spend the dollars when you're walking past the shops. So this is part of a strategy that is very interlinked. It interlinks with the parking precinct plan, also our transport strategy, and this has been ongoing since 2012. So this is not new, and this development application that's in front of us is for 230 parking spots with 18 for 8 residential units. So that leaves us with that. Now, there's been some backward and forward about we'll change this, we'll change that. However, the development application, as advertised, is for 230 spots. There is currently 125 spots on the site. So that leaves us well over quantity than what we actually need. And whether it's 1 or whether it's 101, it is still over. And as such, we really have to refuse this particular development application. We had a development application approved in 2008. I don't know why in 2022 there's such a time demand that a further 45 days for a new development application is unacceptable. Now, he's owned the title for that property for probably 20 years. It's sat there. I can remember the old scout shop and the RSL club. that used to be there, and that was very reluctantly demolished to enable a new development on site. And if we were in 2003 or 4, I'm sure the development application would have been welcomed. But we're not in 2004, we're in 2022, and the world is a considerably different place. Petrol isn't 25 cents a litre, it's $2 a litre. And as it goes up, more and more people will start to question the wisdom of whether they need to have a private car just to come into town. And as people who used to sell CDs and LP records have found, when something new comes along that replaces what you did and said, why would you ever want to own a record when I could submit to a subscription service and listen to the whole world's library? The day will come that people will say, we don't want to own a car, we just want to get from A to B and let the car go off. And so the need for parking will demise. And today is perhaps the day that we say, today we start looking forward, not back. We're starting to say, let's take the cars out of our city. As has been recommended to us by many reports, including our transport strategy. And that is why I'll be voting in support of this, to say we should not approve this particular development application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. This one's got me, don't know which way to go. I've got a couple of questions. It's taken 6 months for this to happen. Did the developer know it didn't comply, and when did he know it didn't comply? I'd like to have that answered, please.
Are you speaking or just asking questions?
Asking the question about that one. When did the developer know it did not comply?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So, just in respect to the 6 months, clearly we were deficient of information which was requested and then provided by the applicant, and obviously we processed it within the statutory time frame that we're required to do that, so it's 42 days once the application is all of the information is fully provided. So in requesting information, certainly the council, the consultant representing the council made the applicant aware of the issue, but it wasn't until they sat down to form their view in the last week before it was submitted that they actually formed their view once they had all of the information provided, and so that was then communicated to the applicant before the agenda was released.
Yeah, it's about a week ago. Yeah. Second question is an increase in officers in Launceston. Can that be compliant with our planning scheme to have more officers in that area?
The consultant, Ashley, would you like to answer that question? Did you hear it?
Yeah, I heard it. Well, officers it's identified as a no permit required use in the planning scheme. Whether it requires a permit or not depends on whether it meets the specific standards in the scheme. But I mean, officers aren't part of this application though that's being considered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Third question is hang on. I don't think it's a major change, which clearly states...
Is that a question or are you speaking?
No, I'll speak now, thanks.
Thank you.
I don't think it's a major change. In the application, it clearly states parking spaces could be changed to other uses. And if this goes to appeal, it's going to cost the ratepayers. This is what always worries me. There's a cost to ratepayers, and it gets over the line. It's an added expense on council. For the future, Mr Smith clearly states all people want more parking. We've got to think of the future. When Launceston grows, there's going to be more people, more shops, more inner city living, and they're all going to need one thing, parking. So there's probably too many parking spots at the moment, yes, but we've got to think of 10, 15 years down the track. What do we do then when we haven't got enough parking? As far as not having cars in the city, I keep saying it, Melbourne and Sydney, you do not need a car. Their transport is that good. They've got trains, trams, buses. It's brilliant. You don't need a car. In Launceston, you need a car. So I'm for more parking, so that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. question from the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. For clarity, with regard to when the applicant was advised that they didn't meet compliance with regard to the local area provisions, wouldn't it be fair to say, though, that in their application they understood that they didn't comply and therefore understood that that would be a standard requiring discretion? They would have known that themselves 6 months ago, wouldn't they?
Leo or Ashley? I don't know. I don't know how we can answer for them.
I'm thinking back, but the original traffic impact assessment, it didn't come in right at the start, but it was addressing the performance criteria from the first iteration that was received. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, question?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Previous speaker mentioned that inner city living would progress and we're doing more parking. Would it not be necessary for any future developments of inner city living to supply parking for that particular property?
It would depend where it is, I would say. Yeah, that's right. Depends which area it's in. Yep, correct.
Yes.
What's a yes and no?
Yes or no?
Any other speakers?
Well, probably Richard, better.
Richard, do you want to follow up on that one?
It wouldn't be a requirement, but provided that you provided no more than the minimum required in the scheme, you would be allowed to have residential car parking.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
I'd like to move to amend a motion, thank you, Mayor, with conditions that are seen as acceptable that would reduce the parking spaces to comply with the scheme.
Yeah, we'll have to wait till this has been voted on before we can do that to see how the vote goes.
Well,
I think, isn't that correct?
Clarify. So, what you're asking again is more than an amendment. It's almost an alternate proposal. So you're seeking to, I assume, to be approving based on a condition to reduce the number of car parking. So that's an alternate motion, not an amendment.
So if this one
you can foreshadow an alternate motion should the current motion fail. So.
I shall foreshadow that then.
Do you wish to speak now, though?
Mayor,
do you wish to speak?
I wish to ask some questions.
Questions, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Just so the councillors are clear that I do believe an alternate motion could solve this and we could move forward with a proposal that is obviously going to be of great benefit to our city.
So you're speaking?
Oh, sorry, no, just to clarify the context in which I'm asking.
Your time's moving now then, thank you.
No, I'm not speaking, I'm asking questions.
You were speaking, sorry, you were speaking.
I'm just clarifying the context in which I'm asking these questions, thank you, Mayor. If I could just ask, to begin with, if I could get some clarity around the amount of car parking spaces that this is excessive compared to the planning scheme and the codes that it transgresses. In various parts of the report it said that it's 80. In the impact assessment, which is quoted by the planner, it refers to 25 spaces. So
thank you. Ashley, you have to answer around there.
The acceptable solution is to not increase existing numbers on the site. So the existing numbers is 125. There's 230 spaces proposed, so 230 minus 125 is 105. So that's the extent of the discretion, is 105 spaces.
Thank you.
So now we have three numbers. Which one is it that we are referring to today? Is it 105, is it 80, or is it 25?
It's just answer that, thank you.
105 is the extent of the discretion.
Thank you. And if we could just talk about the performance criteria that relies upon. Of course, introducing additional accommodation, housing, introducing new businesses in the space, that has an impact on how that discretion can be administered.
Ashley.
So So the discretion can be, the discretion can be exercised. So you can provide up to, so the minimums required by the table in the scheme, they become the maximums that you can provide.
Thank you.
What other examples does the council have, and I'm thinking namely the C.H. Smith development where car parking was introduced, where this discretion has or hasn't been used in the past?
Ashley? I think it's a different area of town, but...
Well, the discretion was exercised there. It involved a mixed-use development as well. So there was a range of uses which were proposed that required parking under consideration of parking under table E6.1. So the amount that was provided was still less than what would have been required if you had applied that table.
Thank you.
When it comes to Launceston's transport strategy, of course, we do expect that Launceston's population will increase. What is the rationale behind the strategy where our population will increase, but we are seeking to only maintain or decrease our parking options?
Who's answering that? Richard?
It's a detailed strategy, but the simple fact is as the population increases and as the number of cars increase, it's difficult to keep satisfying the space required on the roads and in the city for parking forever, because it changes your city, it costs a lot of money in infrastructure, and at some point the better solution or the preferred solution by the strategy is to try and manage that demand, switch modes to different forms which take up less space, and actually use the space in the city for more intense urban uses, so to increase the vitality of the city rather than keep providing car parking in the city. So that's it in a nutshell, is that you can't keep carrying on forever providing for cars. It becomes counterproductive and it starts to impact on the things that we value as a city. And so the strategy proposes an alternate future.
Thank you. Councillor Walker?
Another question, if I may. Thank you, Mayor. This site already provides parking as it is, as an open car parking space, one which is highly used and is highly popular because of its particular location. What consideration is given to that aspect in regards to the performance criteria and the transport code, insofar as it is extremely central for people who may have, for whatever reason, a requirement to park as close as possible to the CBD?
Ashley?
Well, the code enables you to maintain the same number of spaces. So if you're providing the same number, you can redevelop and have the same number of spaces on site, because that makes the acceptable solution.
Thank you.
But we already know that there's instances where you can increase the parking on that side, and that can be an acceptable solution. What would those conditions be in this case?
Well, it's in consideration of the code itself that seeks to limit the amount of parking across the CBD exemption area. So you've got to take on board the parking and the capacity of parking within other off-street parking areas in the CBD.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to speak. As might be clear from my line of questioning, I don't agree with the recommendation to refuse this development application. I know that this is a place where people do choose to park, even though they might pay more than they park elsewhere. It's seen as premium parking in a sense, because it is adjacent. It's central to the central business district. That's the benefit that the landowner has with that particular location. It is a popular location for parents with children, for people who have a disability, for people who want to access quickly a location within the CBD. So of course we all accept that it is a desirable place to park. We also accept that it is possible to increase the amount of parking, and CH Smith is an example that was approved by this council to increase the amount of parking, albeit parking that was assigned to state government offices or to this very council itself. But nonetheless, an increase in parking within the perimeter of the area that we're talking about, the Central Business District parking plan. That's the only other example we have. And so it would seem that this decision, this recommendation rather, flies in the face of that particular decision that was made by this council some years ago. We're talking about ostensibly 25 car parking spaces. This is where we've got to in this negotiated process, where some of these car parking spaces have been allocated for retail premises. They have been allocated for residential purposes. And no doubt that some more of these car parking spaces could be allocated for other purposes, much like has happened in at the CH Smith building. But it seems for whatever reason that process hasn't come to a satisfactory conclusion. And here we are with something that doesn't comply by such a small amount, and yet it will mean a loss of investment in this city, of tens of millions of dollars. And we seem to be quite comfortable with that in this process. I know there's other times where council will bend over backwards to encourage development in this city, but it wouldn't appear that that is the case in this particular instance. I'd like to turn to the performance criteria that this particular recommendation relies upon, and look at the Sustainable Transport Code, and it would appear that most of the conditions this design accommodates. It is only the slight excess in parking spaces, something which the developer themselves has said that they are prepared to address, which is the difference between this being recommended for refusal or being recommended for approval. It seems quite the opposite of what would normally happen in a process when we're dealing with an investment of this size and a development of this size. It might not be the exact type of development that this council would like to see because of its sustainable transport code, but nonetheless our city is growing. There will be more demand for parking in the CBD. You can tell people all you like to park out at North Invermay and come into the CBD. You can tell people to go and catch a bus into the CBD, but it's a work in progress. There's not always those options. Sometimes it's pouring with rain. We know the CBD gets busy at that time. Sometimes, as the Mayor mentioned, during Christmas time, of course, the town is really busy. And if we think and expect, as we do, that there will be more people living in our municipality, then it's reasonable to think that a few more, in fact 25 more car parking spaces might not be an inappropriate concession. In fact, a concession that councillors could make here today. It is a discretion that the councillors have, and it's a discretion that councillors can make today. It's not a ridiculous ask. It's not like we're asking to build a building that's 30 metres taller than the planning scheme. We're asking for a few more car parking spaces, given the fact that, of course, it is also bringing in businesses and accommodation.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Your time's up. Do you need an extension?
If I may, thank you, Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Spencer, seconded by Councillor Harris. All those in favour? That's carried. All counts. You have an extension.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I fully understand the reason why the council would have this sustainable code in their transport scheme. Of course I understand that. It makes sense that we want to discourage, where possible, people from using their personal transport choice to get to the CBD, but it will always be the case. It will always be the case that people will choose to drive a personal vehicle to get to their destination at different times. It might be because they're taking their children into town. It might be because they have to dash into the bank. It might be because, they have to meet somebody in town. And it's not always convenient, no matter how much you might wish to believe that people could actually catch the bus to do these things, or they could hop on a scooter when it's pouring down with rain. That's not going to happen. So we need to have some discretion here, and I implore the councillors around this table to exercise that discretion for the sake of 25 car parking spaces. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and I certainly appreciate all of those contributions that have come before me. It's easy, isn't it, to ask the questions, to receive the answers, and to not hear the responses that are given. So, from my perspective, I think it's really important for us to understand we're not, in fact, Councillor Walker, talking about 25 car spaces, as has been provided in the expert advice that's been received. We're talking about 105. And contextually, we're talking about a commercial premises that will include some 212 car parking spaces. And contextually that's important because this, in terms of an opportunity to achieve compliance, as has been documented in the foreshadowed motion that Councillor Walker has spoken of, as has been provided in expert advice from our council officers as recently as yesterday, has an opportunity to achieve compliance should indeed the application be withdrawn today and be considered on public display without a resubmission of public fees, a resubmission of development fees, be considered and then brought back at a council meeting in the near future. There is an opportunity to achieve compliance, to achieve the economic return that Councillor Walker speaks so favourably of, to achieve all of the outcomes that are demonstrated in some aspects of this development application which are outstanding. Activation in terms of business tenancy, the opportunity for a space that has been left open to receive commercial return for some 15, 16 years or longer by the same person that's lodged the development application some 6 months ago, that lodged a development application without all of the necessary information that the council could pass on to the assessing officer. Opportunity to achieve compliance has been provided to the applicant so that all of those things that we've heard around the table that come from a development application, such as the size and scope of this, can be achieved. For some strange reason that only the developer can answer, they're not willing to achieve compliance through that mechanism. I can't understand why that would be. But what I can do, Mayor, is stand on my feet and say that in approving an application that increases the parking capacity by 105 parking spaces on this site, this is not the city that we are aiming to achieve. This is not the city of the future. It might be the city of the current, and it might be the city that certain demographics want us to achieve and want us to continue to comply with and provide, but I don't think it's the city of the future. A city of the future is one that, has traffic calming, has greening, has a sense of vitality and vibrancy, has people in it, not has cars doing laps and laps. And one of the speakers talked about, drivers going round and round and round searching for a space. Crazy. That's not the city we're trying to create. And it's not the city of the future that we want to perpetuate. So I understand that for some people, it is difficult for us to knock back a development of this size and scale. It's difficult for me. It's difficult for all of us. But at the same time, we're providing an opportunity to achieve compliance in order to have a development application of this size and scale returned to the council table, or perhaps not, returned to the council table after a period of advertising that sees the third level of parking converted to offices, and that would achieve compliance. It would reduce the number, it would achieve compliance, and would provide all of those returns that other councillors have spoken of. I understand that for some people, perhaps they're drawing on other things that are not specifically to do with planning, and if that's the case, Mayor, that's really disappointing. What's provided before us are the standards requiring planning discretion, and quite clearly 6.1 and the local area provisions 7.1.3 are absolutely paramount to our consideration to this item. Clearly connected with the Transport Code, with Sustainable Future, with the local central business district parking exemption area and the interim planning scheme, clearly documented as to why that excess of 125 or 25 or even one is in breach of that. And so you can't be wanting to create a sustainable council and a sustainable city one day and then not wanting to back it up the next. Because that's not how it works. You either have these documents that guide the future of the city or you don't. And I think it's really important today that we say we're providing an opportunity for this to achieve compliance whilst backing ourselves and backing the scheme and backing the process that sees us also defend the strategic imperatives that we've set and have been set in the past for the city.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward, wish to close?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and as always, I thank councillors who made contributions. It's been a very interesting discussion, Mr Mayor, and I'm certainly not going to dwell in closing because, again, when we look at the conclusion, point 7, page 25, it is considered that the proposal does not comply with the scheme. Specifically, the provisions in the Parking and Sustainable Transport Code applicable to the Launceston Central Business District parking exemption area, and it is appropriate to recommend for refusal. I mean, you couldn't get any clearer than that in the conclusion, I wouldn't think, Mr Mayor. I do understand, as I said in my opening remarks when I moved the item, as was, that there is a motion and so forth attached to here. I certainly don't take things personally, but I would like to think that people out there in the community would think that I'm a strong advocate for development and business in this city, as I would like to think that all 12 people around this table are. And once again, as the Deputy highlighted, if this is judged to be non-compliant, it is very simple to go away and make the changes to make it compliant. It has been highlighted again and again that that's possible. And we've had that, Mr Mayor, with other developments that have come to this table. I've heard people argue very passionately about hotels and other businesses that they don't believe should be here. But once again, it's a matter of taking it away. The other point that I wanted to make, Mr Mayor, there was much reference to C.H. Smith. Well, this has got nothing to do with that. This is an application to deal with a certain site and a certain address in a certain part of the city. Nothing to do with what's happened elsewhere. We don't deal with that, Mr Mayor, with other things. If someone's dealing with a planning issue in Norwood, you know, what happens at Viewbank Road at Newnham's got nothing to do with it. We deal with what is in front of us, and I said that right at the very start. I'm very comfortable, Mr Mayor, with the professional advice provided to us. We've made it very, very clear what needs to happen to make this comply. I would certainly not want to lose development of this city, but I would urge those, the developer and his team, and the organisation to look at what they need to do to make this development compliant, and I would welcome it back at the table when those changes were made that make it compliant. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? So 2 against and the rest are for. The motion is carried. So we move on to 9.2. We do have speakers for 9.2. Abigail Turner. Oh, welcome back.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. I'm basically very concerned with the...
Just state your name and address for the record.
Sorry, my name is Abigail Turner and my address is 29 Longwood Avenue.
Thank you.
I'm personally very concerned with the proposed unit, which is... It's proposed to be behind our property at the end of Longwood Avenue. I basically would like to just reiterate that the driveway floods. There was repairs to the driveway, but they were not adequate. I find it a question, even though we do have a building crisis in our city, and I'm very aware of that, I question why this would be permitted or allowed on the grounds that the driveway does go under it often or nearly under. It's wetlands. I question how number 39 actually ever was built there. I know an old age home was proposed in that land and it was knocked back. Why it was ever permitted, I understand that it's there, but this is a unit. There's other issues surrounding a unit, duty of care to the tenants. Should that be that? Should that be used in that purpose? So I really want to just make a public appeal in regards to that. I also just would like to say it's not safe. You have to come at quite high speeds up the driveway, and we're sitting right next to it, and it's gravel, and it really can throw some gravel. There's
I think your time is up. Can you just wind up now?
There's a question surrounding why I don't have a fence, and the reason I can't put a fence there is because the pipes are actually on my land, and we actually partially own the driveway. It's on my land.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I have Celeste, I think it is Turner or James Turner. I'm not sure who's speaking. Not here? I'm not speaking now. Okay. So there's no other speakers? Thank you. So we have number 9.2, item 9.2. Someone happy to move 9.2? Councillor Mackenzie moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Spencer. Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to speak to it?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I note the comments and concerns raised by the previous speaker, and I know a couple of other representations have been put through. It's an unusual block of land, to say the least, in an unusual location with an unusual access. But the reality of it is it's a legal access. It is used to access number 31, Longwood Avenue, and therefore 29A, which is the proposed subdivision, will access along that road. So I imagine during times of flood, 31 gets flooded in, and I imagine somebody who lives at 29A to B will have the same issues, and I think that's been outlined by our officers. Looking through, there are a number of discretions, but the discretions have all been answered by the officers, and I think to my satisfaction in regards to how they've been dealt with. Why a person chooses to build somewhere which is in a difficult area, and it looks like a very difficult build to me. So I don't know there'd be somewhere that I'd necessarily choose to do, but that's not my choice. Somebody's determined to buy that land, it's been subdivided off and it's zoned to be able to do that. There have been a number of issues regarding elm trees in Newton Crescent, and I understand that. We've dealt with elm trees and other issues in other suburbs in Launceston, and protections have been put in place considered to be conditioned in this particular issue. But reading through it, other than the unusual and difficult site that we're talking about, the house is going to be above the flood level, quite understandably. The person who's wishing to build on it will be aware of the flood risks associated with the access on 31 Longwood Avenue. And the officers have spoken about whether at some stage they need to look at raising the side of the road. Unfortunately, other than that, I don't think this is an issue which is difficult for us to understand, nor for us to actually approve.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting this today. The only issue I had was the 200 mil of water that goes over the bridge, which is nothing. That can be easily resolved by concrete net or fitting extra gravel. So this house is roughly 200 metres away from other properties. It's well up on the hill, and I will fully support it. Only issue, that water probably comes up every 10 years, which is nothing. We have more trouble in Bathurst Street with floods than what floods at that bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Question, if I may, Mayor. Thank you. I did already broach this subject with the planners. There's an access lane, which is ostensibly the creek that the bridge runs over on the plans, and therefore the bridge itself would appear to be potentially on land that's owned by the council. So I just have some concern, and it might not be possible for a planner to answer a legal question, but that bridge, should it need repair, should it be, deemed unsafe, should it get, damaged, that the council may have some liability there.
Duncan.
Thank you. Yes, and apologies, I wasn't able to get back to you prior to the meeting to answer that. The right-of-way goes over a portion of council's land, which is nominally called Longwood Avenue Lane. The crossover, or the bridge, as we say, the culvert and the crossing on top of it, is in fact a private infrastructure. It's not part of council's infrastructure. So whilst we own the right-of-way and we have to allow access over it, we're not responsible for the maintenance of that right-of-way.
Thank you. Any further questions? You wish to speak, Councillor Walker?
Yes, I do wish to speak, and if that's a legal sort of decision, then I'm supportive of this particular application. I can understand the concerns that are expressed, and that's reasonable if there's a change in your little neck of the woods. This change is not about to bring a large volume of traffic. It's not unduly situated to impact on people's amenity. I can understand, the slight difficulties of access, including the bridge itself. If I'm assured that the bridge is not a council asset, it's the right of way over our strip of land, which is a lane. It is a designated, road, if you like, which is really just the gully, and might possibly have been there because people used to walk up the gully from somewhere to somewhere else. But nonetheless, it's there. That's the only, mitigating factor that I can see. And as I say, appreciate some of the concerns. It will be a minimal impact, an impact nonetheless. There will be, slightly more traffic. And by all means, I would, and I'm sure every councillor would, encourage people to be neighbourly and to consider, if there is an issue with a gravel driveway, that they make efforts to address that. But certainly, it doesn't have the impacts that you might associate with a subdivision some other time, so I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We go to 9.3. We do have a speaker, James Stewart. Just state your name and address for the records, thank you.
Yeah, sure. James Stewart, Woolcott Surveys, 10 Goodman Court, Invermay. My name is James Stewart. I'm a town planner with Woolcott Surveys, who are the applicants for the rezone and subdivision application at the Launceston Golf Club at Opossum Road in Kings Meadows. I'm here today to speak in support of the planner's recommendation to initiate the amendment for a partial rezone and subdivision. In relation to the rezoning, the land is within a primary consolidation area under the regional land use strategy. The purpose of this area is to provide for residential development within close proximity to a major activity centre. In this instance, the Kings Meadows shopping precinct and the services it provides are only a 5-minute walk from the subject site. The portion of land being rezoned is vacant, unutilised land. Its previous use was the old driving range associated with the Launceston Golf Club. It is a large grass section of the site which does not contain any native vegetation. The land is not subject to a scenic management overlay, bushfire overlay or landslip hazard overlay. The site can be serviced for water, sewer, stormwater, power and NBN. The portion of land will adjoin established residential development. It's considered infill development which is appropriately located within an existing settlement. In relation to the subdivision, the rezoning will provide for a new 1.2 hectare residential lot, along with a new cul-de-sac road off Opossum Road. The cul-de-sac road and design has been extensively discussed with council officers prior to the lodgement of the application. It is expected that the new residential lot will facilitate a multiple dwelling development, noting that any future application would come before council. This development will not have any detrimental impact on the operation of the existing golf course. Today, we request that the council follow the planner's recommendation and initiate the amendment, thus allowing the application to be advertised for public comment. We thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No speakers. So 9.3, somebody happy to move? 9.3, Councillor Harris moved, seconded Councillor Spencer. Just to speak to it, Councillor Harris.
I will briefly, Mayor. This is the start of a process to rezone this land, to allow this to be subdivided off the existing golf course, to be then be used potentially for residential development, whether that be individual lots or whether it might be a multi-tenanted, a medium density type development is yet to be decided. But what we are doing here today is starting a process. It will enable people to have their say about it, and it will come back before us at a future date to make a final decision on based on that feedback. I do understand, as the Speaker mentioned, that the cul-de-sac has been, I guess, provisioned wide enough to be of street quality rather than just an access to the golf club. That will enable us to take over the ownership of that at some future time, and that is just good planning. This was originally brought to us probably 12 months ago when there were 2 sites on the golf course that they had determined were surplus to their needs that could be developed for housing. One at the Norwood end of the course and this one at the Kings Meadows end. And as the planner said, it certainly is close, handy to the Kings Meadows commercial area and shopping, and that's one thing we're not making any more of is land that's close, handy to be developed. So I'm quite happy to support this motion to rezone this land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I will definitely be supporting this. Flat land is rare, no rock land is rare. Very scarce land is at the moment in Launceston, so the more we can get like this, the better. So I fully support it. And it's all close to shopping, like Councillor Harris said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
A question, please, Mayor.
Yes, you certainly may.
We've just heard from the someone speaking for the approval that it is flat land, that it is open grassland, and yet the land itself appears to be bordered by vegetation. We also heard that it's not native vegetation. I'd be interested to hear from the developers what vegetation is there on the land and what is the nature of that, because I was under the impression that it did have established trees on the block.
Done? Yep, go for it.
Thank you.
Sorry,
a bit loud. There is vegetation over the site that will be rezoned. It wasn't a consideration to determine. I mean, nothing's being proposed to be removed at this stage. There's no biodiversity overlay over it. So I guess generally it wasn't a consideration of what sort of vegetation is there. So we don't need to take that into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, you wish
to
speak?
I wish to speak if I can, thank you. Yeah, I just wish to clarify that because I didn't want it being presented as a block that has no vegetation. It indeed does have vegetation that borders quite a number of properties, and I'm sure that those residents would appreciate that vegetation being there, whether it is for amenity, shade, animal habitat or whatever it might be, I'm not sure. And I know that's not the consideration today exactly in terms of this subdivision and reassignment of the planning scheme zone, but nonetheless, I think it needs to be acknowledged that it's there, and I'm sure, well, I'd expect that if someone does live there and, is looking to object, then this may well be one of the reasons that they would object too, that in essence it's being dealt with as a block that has no vegetation. In fact, that's what's being, it's being described as, and it's just not true. So I have concerns about that. Of course, we all appreciate the pressures of housing and that this may well provide additional solutions to our housing crisis, and that would be a great thing. We recognise it's not mostly native vegetation there, but nonetheless, an acknowledgement that there is vegetation there would be nice, especially if this does proceed towards its final approval. So I shall wait with interest to see what people who may be affected by this have to say.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor. No, just to briefly say, I think from memory, having lost a few golf balls, Cootamundra Wattles or something like that are about there, and I think they're considered almost like a weed in the summer in some areas. But yes, it is in fact the start of a process for people to have their say. So I hope the rest of the council support it.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Council now no longer sits as a planning authority. So we move on to no mayor's announcements, so we'll go to councillor reports. Any council reports, council law reports that are relevant to the meeting? Councillor Harris?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Like yourself, I attended the MS Walk, Run and Roll on Sunday, and thankfully the weather was a little kinder to us this year. Around about 150 people took part in that event, which was good fun. I also attended the state budget lunch on Friday at the Hotel Grand Chancellor to listen to the state government and their plans for the future as far as the finances of our state's concerned. But more importantly, I did attend the LGAT Climate Change Conference on Wednesday, which was a most interesting conference to participate in. I followed the advice of those of you around the table when I wasn't in the room and rode my bike. Some other councillors who travelled further distance than I did, coming from Norwood, chose to bring an electric car. Someone hired a Tesla for the occasion, and another southern-based councillor who lives south of Hobart chose not to trust the his electric Leaf would get here and back on one charge. So it does show that perhaps we still need to have a little bit of work to done on the development of our electric vehicles. I guess the overriding theme that came out of the climate change conference for me was that we as a city are leading in a lot of areas, and we have a lot to be proud of with our FOGO and various other services that we offer. I think we are, showing the rest of the councillors, perhaps, or the councils, how it can be done in a sustainable way, but also bring the community with us. But we have to look at virtually every decision through the lens of what climate change may mean for the future. And so it is about looking forward, not about looking back. And I guess that comes into what I was saying about the car parking. I don't believe that in 20 years people will be looking for car parks in the centre of Launceston, because things will have changed so much, whether it be the price of fuel or otherwise. It will be very different to what we have now, and I hope that we would actually have 10,000 people living in the CBD of Launceston by that stage. And of course, if they live in the CBD with a kilometre of the mall, they're not going to need a car, they'll just walk everywhere. So that was a really interesting day that I spent at the Climate Change Conference put on by LGAT, and I will just summarise a day that we spent at the with the ABCDE and Sarah at Kings Meadows High School for the first mural that was being painted there in Kings Meadows, and a fantastic job was done by the artist and the students of the Kings Meadows High School, and stay tuned for another one in the Kings Meadows area later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with yourself and Councillor Priest, we attended the Women's Art Prize on the 20th of May, celebrating 20 years. Eddie James was a standout winner of the Acquisitive Prize from the Toowoomba Foundation. She won $15,000 for her exceptional piece on the perspective of a woman trying to hide from a violent situation. It was really confronting, but exceptionally well told. So, established in 2002 as Material Girl, this event has moved and changed with the times and been able to adapt. It was initially an International Women's Day event, but has become one of the most prestigious art prizes in Tasmania. So you can still vote for the People's Choice Award, and I urge you all to go onto the website and cast your vote, because there's some really fantastic multimedia, a whole range of excellent pieces, and I'd like to see who's going to win that People's Choice Award, please.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. Last Wednesday I attended, and I dressed up in a different tie to what I is today, and attended simultaneous story time out at the Northern Suburbs Community Centre, where I read stories to young children from around. And simultaneous story time is where one story is read at the same time at 11 o'clock on the Wednesday of the year all around Australia. And I think there were over 2 million participants coming into that thing. It was just a real joy to see the fun and times that the kids had, probably not necessarily listening to me, but listening to other things that were going on around them. But you know, it's just one of those sort of things which are really engaging children in the education process and the whole concept of storytelling, which I thought was fantastic. And the book that we read this year was written by Josh Pike, who's better known for his music.
Thank you. Any other council reports? No? Questions by councillors? Any questions? Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a question about January 26th. Given that this council voted to change the date and that successive Tasmanian premiers agree with us, could we approach decision makers in Canberra to release us from holding citizenship ceremonies on January 26th?
Yeah, we could write to them. Happy to do that. Thank you. The new government, see what their stance is. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Committee reports. Cataract Gorge, move Councillor Walker. Second to Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker, wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I do. Just to note that that the council, the committee certainly received an update on the weed management strategy for the gorge and surrounds, which is currently under development, and just means that it gives the council I suppose, a weapon. As I've said before, I wouldn't recognise a weed from a native if I tripped over it, probably half the time, but pesky little things sometimes, very obvious at other times, but nonetheless a plan that involves being able to deal with them at different times of the year, and for us as a council to be able to follow. Interestingly, I was contacted by the Australian Native Plant Society, who would like to see a similar thing in some of the other reserves that council maintain, some of them near the gorge, like Cambridge Street, West Launceston and places like that, because they see that can impact on the gorge. If you have a weed in your garden and you live near the gorge, that can have an impact on the gorge. So this has to go broader. Of course, dare I use a former Prime Minister's terminology, we're blessed to have so many native areas around our city, and it would be nice to think that from the weed management strategy that we're developing here, that could be spread around to other areas in and around Launceston. And to that end, it was also discussed, the appropriateness of the council to have, at some stage in the future, a bush heritage officer, something that other councils do have, such as in Hobart. And it would go together with that growing awareness, I suppose, as to how we can best protect our nature reserves. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. Any other council wish to speak to Cataract Gorge report? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that's carried by all councillors present. Northern Youth Coordinating Committee, move Deputy Mayor. Seconded. Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor, wish to speak to it?
Look, it's all there. Just dot point 2. Love to expand on the Youth Network of Tasmania. Why not have got the Statewide Forum happening tomorrow in Launceston. It's great that that has continued in the form that we're used to out of COVID. The theme tomorrow is I Am Me, providing lots of opportunities for young people to come and discuss the idea of being inclusive and the idea of being able to achieve all that you want as a young person in Tasmania through opportunities, through support and through connection. So we look forward to young people from our own youth group and from schools and various other youth groups around the state coming together here in Launceston tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So then we move on to Heritage Advisory Committee. Move Councillor McKenzie, second to Councillor Walker. Wish to speak to it, Councillor?
Just briefly, Mayor, just noting that we actually had a presentation from Meningaloo and also Beth Jackson from Artfully in regards to the public art strategy, and I guess as it affected heritage buildings, and it was quite a good enlightening discussion about how that gets utilised and how we can actually make sure that we don't end up accidentally doing things that we wish we hadn't done in relation to heritage activities. And I guess that led us on to another conversation about a DA that's out there currently, or not, I think, a proposal to actually paint the wilderness shop, and just particularly, I guess, the Heritage Tas view in regards to the shop front and how that was dealt with. And we had a really, I thought, really good discussion about that as to what's too far and what's okay. So there was some really good conversation about that, which I think was useful in relation to the context of that particular DA, and in relation to a number of other matters. So very, very insightful meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So the audit panel meeting. Move Councillor McKenzie, second to Councillor Walker. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
As you can see, we do a lot of things in the audit committee meeting. There's nearly 2 pages of it, but a lot does go on in those meetings. The officers do a fantastic job in presenting a lot of things, but there's dealing with internal and external audit matters that are going on where our internal systems are tested by the internal auditors to see that they're actually performing in the way that we think they should be, and if there are any things that we can improve. And usually there becomes an improvement plan that comes out of that, which the officers are tasked to respond to. But there's some really good and insightful work, and it just shows that there's a real good link between our internal auditors and what we do internally in the organisation, just to make sure that we're functioning at the high level that we expect a council of our nature to do so. There are a number of other things like the budget amendments, which we'd already had flowed through this council previously, and an analysis of the financial statements, which we'll get to have a talk about in a few minutes when we get to review the results up to the end of March, which are showing an extremely favourable result. Looking at our investment returns and things like that, given that the interest rate that we're in, just looking and making sure that we're being as effective as efficient in relation to how we invest the surplus funds that we have sitting on our balance sheet. Work, health and safety. So it's a very broad-ranging scope that the audit committee undertakes, and I think a really valid process and a really useful process, I think, which this council requires because of its size and complexities. And I would say, from what I see in it, it's really well dealt with, and we've got 3 external advisors who come in and just give advice and actually review what we do, which is really useful, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, wish to add anything?
Just briefly, Mayor, just to reiterate that it's the way that these things are dealt with. I mean, I'm no accountant, I'll admit, but nonetheless, the diligence that I observe in this process of going through the various risks to this council and the various opportunities. It's certainly a learning experience for me. I'm not just there to make up the numbers, mind you. I'm providing a legitimate, layman's approach to the whole thing. And certainly that would include, when it comes to the council, our investment strategy and policy. There are areas that are... most of these areas need continual monitoring and updating. That's the interesting thing. It's not a static process. That risks have to be continually monitored because, of course, in a changing world, and I'm sure anyone in business would know this, that they're constant sort of risks. And in an organisation as big as this, dealing with a budget as big as we do, and having so many different parts, working parts, I suppose, it is, it's a bit of an eye-opener for me, but it's also reassuring to see that external spotlight that's put on those processes within council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Do you wish to close, Councillor?
Just briefly, as intimidating as it must be for Councillor Walker to be there with a room full of very vibrant accountants, he does add a valuable process. I think it does actually having people ask what one might call questions, which are not necessarily accounting related, but specifically actually challenges, I think is a really good thing. I think actually having non-accountants on that committee is actually very valuable to the process.
Order, please. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Cox? Yeah, that's all councillors present. That is carried. We move on to Community and Place Network, 14.1. Move, Councillor. Yeah, we're going to have just a minute. Mr. Councillor Mackenzie will explain how it's done. Councillor Stojanczyk, 14.1 moves it. Is there a seconder? And we do in parts of it or the whole lot of this one? Which parts, so we know? So you're seconding, Councillor Harris. Move, Councillor Stojanczyk, second to Councillor... Oh, we've got a speaker. He's left. Oh, that was the next one anyway. Sorry. Oh, phew, you had me worried.
I'll speak to the item in more detail once I move the remainder of the applications, but we're just looking at the Women's 5K Fun Run at the moment, which is a really well-organised event and a really worthwhile cause, and it's being recommended for 75% of funding today.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, anything to add? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So now we go 14.1, the balance.
Right. Firstly, I would like to thank the officers for all of the support they've provided the applicants. And
wait a minute, we haven't got to... We're going to move the rest now, are we?
Yes.
Yeah, move seconded by Deputy Mayor.
I'm going.
Just had to get a mover and a seconder. Now you may speak, yes.
So I'd like to thank the officers for the support they've provided the applicants and for all of the work they've put into the provision of information to the committee. I'd also like to thank the external committee members and councillors, Councillors Harris and Daking, for the time taken to assess and score the applications. I believe the process that the applications go through is robust, and through pre-scoring and then further discussion at the meeting, this process ensures a fair outcome for all. This round of funding saw small events such as a diverse suite of applications, including fun runs, a storytelling festival, the Christmas parade, the poetry festival, the Festival of Dance and a fermentation trail.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Look, just briefly, I'd love to congratulate the members of the panel, both the elected councillors, the staff and, importantly, the external members, because it's not an easy job. And I think what the suite of recommendations before us reminds us all, accountants, community placemakers, councillors and everyone in between, that the return that is provided from our investment into large and small events is absolutely profound for this community. It's not discretionary, it's not a nice to do, it's an absolute critical component of creating a city that is vibrant and that has deliverables that can be achieved through the suite of things that are on. More and more, people are telling us from the tourism space that those peaks that used to occur during winter as one-offs are flattening out. And that is what we're able to achieve through presenting a calendar of events, both small and large, you know, from the mega in AFL, the support that we provide to the AgFests and the V8s through the Tourism Tasmania, but through to these small things that make Launceston the place that you want it to be as a place to call home. And I think more and more we need to remind ourselves that the return, whilst on one side of the ledger might not seem large, is incredibly massive to our community through our investment in events such as this and the next items.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Stojanczyk and the committee for the hard work they've done with that, and I wanted to associate myself with her remarks and the remarks of the Deputy. And when we deal with the budget, the council budget, when we deal with that one, I always say that there's something in the budget for everyone, and this, Mr Mayor, certainly highlights that. And as the Deputy put in such an articulate manner, there is just a massive range of things in there that play a key role for such a small sum of money at times from the council. So sadly, if I had to get a negative, Mr Mayor, with this particular this item and round of items, is we never have enough money. Wouldn't it be great if we had more money to support people? But on a more serious note than that, I guess one of the frustrations I have from time to time is you won't see any commentary on Chit Chat Launceston about this stuff. You won't see anyone out there saying, golly, didn't that $2,000 or $5,000 or $1,500 make a massive difference to this wonderful group of people? So I really think we do provide massive return on investment, massive bang for buck for the wonderful things that make this city such a special place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
As a vibrant accountant, I can actually see plenty of value in these, Deputy Mayor. I think that the value is not always told in money. It's always told in how the community develops and so forth. So I again support this. One of the things I just wanted to talk on, and I won't talk on it in everyone, but just the scoring. We see the 70% and the 69% and things like that, and you sit there and think, oh, this is because some people are better at putting applications together than others. But if you sit there and really look at the assessment criteria, there's a whole raft of things that are taken into consideration: the community spirit, the creativity and innovation, the inclusiveness, asset usage and things like that. So there's a real raft of criteria that are measured in coming up with these 75 and 80% and things that come in. And I've often thought, oh, somebody got 79% and they got 80, they'd have got 100% of the thing rather than 75%. And one I was looking at a little bit later on, I felt, well, why isn't that the case? But the reality of it is it's a fairly complex measuring system, and which every member of that committee needs to mark and score against, and a number pops out at the end. And I guess it's not predetermined by any of the individual people who are making those assessments, but it's important to note that these are things. So there's a broad range of things that these events have to fulfil before they're actually funded by council. And I think it's a good process, and I think we've been working on that over the years, and I see we've reviewed our criteria for how we actually put people onto this committee going forward. I think when we look at it a little bit later on, I think that's a really good thing. But I just really wanted to mention that because I think it's really important that we understand what those scores actually mean.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to highlight that process that other councillors are speaking about, Beaker Street, I see in there the fermentation trail festival that they're having. To see a predominantly science-based group who I've attended events that they've held in Hobart previously, more likely to be discussions about a subject or other, but to see them stepping into the event field, and who knew that science could be an event as well, it's just a good example of how that is changing, and indeed how the committee responds to that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone further on 14.1? Councillor Stosenchek, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. 14.2, move Councillor Stosenchek with which item? All of them or just part of them?
We'll do the cycle challenge first.
It's seconded by... Sorry, do we get a seconder for this? Councillor Spencer, thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Stosenchek?
Just briefly. So we're just looking at the Tamar Valley Cycle Challenge at the moment, which obviously is another great event, and it's recommended for 75% of funding today.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. All good. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is all councillors present. That is carried. We move on to which one now?
We're just looking at Encore.
So we're still on 14.2. Councillor
Yep.
Harris can come back, can't he?
Yes.
If he wants to. Maybe he's gone home, hasn't he?
Okay. So we're just looking at the Encore Theatre Company production of Jersey Boys this time. Obviously.
Sorry, we haven't got it.
Yeah. Okay, it's a very popular event on the theatre calendar for Launceston, and that's reflected in the high score. They always do a really good job, and I'm sure everyone enjoys going along to see the show.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer, wish to add? Is happy with that? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So now, the rest of 14.2. Move Councillor Stojanczyk. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Stojanczyk?
Sure. So this major events funding round saw some regular applicants, such as Encore Theatre Company, the Peace Festival, as well as various cycling events. I'm really excited about the upcoming events calendar and encourage councillors to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, just briefly, as I guess one of the people who puts on these events with the Tamar Valley Cycle Challenge, I'd just like to say how important it is for the council to consider to continue to support such events to make the events happen, because whilst the overall budgets of many of these greatly exceed the grant that we provide, it is all critical to making sure the financial success of what they do. And in many cases, particularly where it's either fundraising or in the case of Encore Theatre, where their risk is quite huge, what they have to outlay up front, having such a grant program and for special events and for events is really fantastic, and something that we should be very proud of as supporting. Makes us a very vibrant city, as others have said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. It just reminded me of I think it was in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, where a young fellow was about to make the speech before, and I asked what was going to be. He said, I think there's something in there for everyone. And this really does have something in there for everyone. It's got music, it's got food, it's got other cultural pursuits. So I think this is what it's all about, and really living the dream of being a cultural city.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I was thinking as Councillor Walker spoke about 4 Weddings and a Funeral, it's as random as the advertisement that features a greyhound with a party hat in its head that I saw recently. But what I wanted to say, Mayor, was that the standard of what is presented before us and the budgets, which Councillor Harris referenced, are absolutely so huge. I mean, strategically, these events are ticking off all the things that we want. They're activating nighttime economy. They're working in the northern suburbs. They're building on our sustainability and our food, city of gastronomy. They are linked to our branding. And I think what it does is it presents us with an opportunity. How are we as a council leveraging and supporting our place brand, supporting our own strategic intentions through the investment that we're making in these events? And I think that's something we've never fully realised, and I look forward to us being able to really achieve that, because it's so important. The investment's sizable, and all of these groups and organisations are doing our work for us. We need to capitalise on that, because my word, they are wanting to share, they're wanting to collaborate, they're wanting to grow their audience segments, and I think there's an opportunity just waiting for us to take advantage of.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Stojanczyk, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Now 14.3. Move Councillor Stojanczyk. The whole lot as is. I think we're right for... Well, just checking. Somebody wanted to leave the room? Seconded. Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Stojanczyk?
Sure. TasDance has put forward an excellent application for a project, Lonnie Can Dance, which will see a series of 40+ dance workshops run in the northern suburbs, culminating in rehearsals and a 90-minute dance and video performance in the Princess Theatre. I wholeheartedly support this application and encourage you to do the same.
Thank you. Councillor Harris? Any other? Councillor Walker?
Yes, I will just speak to it briefly, and TasDance, of course, recently combined with other community-based arts groups, Mudlark Theatre being one, I think, into Assembly 197, just for that clarity that they are sort of building and branching out in terms of an arts hub, if you like. And, this, special event sponsorship is perfect for this type of thing, this one-off type of event where people have a great idea and the council can help to facilitate to see it through. I note that there's still quite a bit of money in the budget for that special event sponsorship, and I'd be, as a councillor, interested to learn more how the process for that particular granting goes. I presume it's an ad hoc basis as people come along, so it's good for people to know that there's, certainly for the next financial year, or the one that we will soon find ourselves in, there's money there to be accessed.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I probably when I read this, I was a bit disappointed in the first instance saying they'd put in an application for 40,000 and they've ended up with 22.5. I note the panel looked at the application and assessed that it was only being $30,000 value, which is our maximum amount. So I sort of thought, okay, well, that's ratcheted back to what we think is appropriate. And then, as I said in an earlier conversation, that really they measure it based on the assessment criteria there and a number pops out at the other end. Unfortunately, they didn't get the extra 4 or 5% they required to get to the 30,000. But again, it is what it is. It's the process in which we've adopted to go through. And the minute we say, oh, we should give them a bit more because they're good people, we get ourselves in all sorts of strife with future criteria analysis that we do things. So I commend the application and the way that it's been addressed in relation to it, and I support the amount that we're actually proposing to grant them.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Stojanczyk wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we go to 14.4. We haven't got that speaker back by chance out there? No, no speaker there. So 14.4, move Councillor Stojanczyk, seconded Councillor Spencer. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Stojanczyk?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank the officers again for all their hard work on this round of funding. I'd also like to thank the external committee members and councillors, Walker and Spencer, for their time assessing the applications. This round of grants has attracted a diverse range of applications, including the Men's Table, Just Cats, Stompen, the Thai Association and many others. I want to thank all of the applicants for attempting to get a range of projects off the ground during what is still an unstable time. I'm sure these projects will help colour our community. We also have a range of individual applicants recommended for funding. I encourage you to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Yes, I had the pleasure in reading all the reports on these in Caravan one full weekend. There was that much reading, but I really enjoyed it. And thanks I normally give fairly low marks, but this, all these were worthy receivers. So I'm very happy to give them what we've told them there. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. People who've missed out by a couple of % won't be happy to hear that, Councillor Spencer, with your tough marking, I can tell you. But in all seriousness, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to echo my earlier remarks and thank Councillor Stojanczyk and other committee members, I think she said Councillor Walker and Councillor Spencer, for their hard work, and other external members. Again, when we look at the list of activities there, it's a very fulsome list. It's a wide range of things. It supports the other wide range of things in the earlier list. And once again, it's just terrific to see so many people doing so many different things, particularly in light of the fact that we've come out of a couple of very challenging years. So wonderful, and happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. I'd just like to touch on the Just Cats project closing the colony and say what an enlightened position it is for this council to have supported it, because right now there are dozens of colonies in the city of Launceston. They might be 5 cats, it could be 30, but what's been astounding to me since these amendments have passed is just how many colonies there are in Tasmania, and that because the amendments weren't funded through the state government, that's come to councils. This is the first council I know that's actually acknowledged the problem by giving some money to a cat management facility to start to address it. So congratulations, well done. Unfortunately, I think this is the beginning of many of these kinds of asks, but it's been incredibly difficult for other organisations to get funding for these projects, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Stojanczyk wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, or raise your hands, and that is all councillors present. So we go to 14.5, review of the terms of reference. Move Councillor Stojanczyk, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Stojanczyk?
Once again, I'd like to thank the council officers for reviewing and refining the terms of reference for the Community Grants Committee. assessment panel, I should say. The review followed the resignation of an external member. The terms now define the recruitment of panel members as well as the terms of appointment. The changes bring the terms of reference in line with standard provisions for other council committees which have external members. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to commend, I read the new terms of reference before I went and read the amendments that were made, and I thought really well done. I thought terrific thought processes that went into sort of, I think, amending. They're subtle, some of them, but I think they actually just really, vamp up the whole context of the committee, I think, really well. I just wanted to finish with a question, because I think it also says at the end there that we would go ahead and elect community representatives as a result of this. Do we not run our committees from council to council, and therefore this is going to be a crossover from this council into the new council? Is that something, or would we run out till the end of this council and then appoint? Just read to me like we're going to go to market now.
To check, I'm not sure whether Tracy's out there, but we certainly, that deals with the appointment of councillors to committees, doesn't necessarily refer to if you've got an existing...
I thought it was an all-in, all-out.
I'm not sure, I don't, but we've got Tracy's here.
Expert, Tracy.
Thank you. The community representatives are, I guess, recruited via an expression of interest process, and so the revised terms of reference actually calls for that to be done on the alternate 2 years to council, so that we've actually got some continuity of assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, has a question.
I note that obviously to administer it, the grants and sponsorship officer is there. Was there any thought, as it should be, to administer it, was there any thought given to linking in with our own community development staff? Notwithstanding you as the manager is there, but was there thought given to them also being part of that with regard to us strengthening our community development offering?
Tracy.
Certainly, it is actually standard practice that the team leader of community development does provide some expertise into the assessment, but yeah, good point, it could have been noted in the terms of reference. I can add that if you would like.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak, Deputy?
If I may, I think that's really great, and obviously I appreciate what Tracy as the manager has said there, because I think what we're looking to do is continue to strengthen our offering. We've seen some great developments occurring in that space. So if that would be possible, perhaps it could be listed with regard to, it says the panel will include the manager livable communities and the grants and sponsorship officer. Perhaps there could be a comma there that also includes that staff member as well.
Team leader, community development.
No, yes. That's noted. Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Stolarczyk, wish to close? I will put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 15.1, the Launceston Flood Authority. Moved. Is that correct, isn't it? Yeah. Councillor Mackenzie, second to Councillor Cox. Do you wish to speak to Councillor Mackenzie?
A man who knows his flood levy, so why would I not support it?
Councillor Cox.
I think the man concerned's been up to his neck for years.
Oh. Any other speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. 16.1, public feedback. Moved Councillor Soward. Seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to Councillor Soward?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and I want to start by thanking the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who took the time after our release of the budget to take some time, those individuals, and contribute their thoughts and make the effort to make a submission, some of which the officers have provided some clarity to some queries that some of the residents had. Some of the submissions provide commentary about economic circumstances, Mr Mayor, that are well beyond the power of this council, and I might add other data has come in there that's, I guess, strengthened the challenges that the national and world economy face at the moment. But in reading through the points raised, I think it's very, very timely that residents have had the opportunity to raise those, and it's certainly the responses that the council officers have sent to them I think also reflect well on us, because sometimes explaining why things are the way they are certainly helps clarify any concerns that people have. I said, Mr Mayor, in my opening remarks, I thanked the 5 people who took the time to respond to us. I did for the purposes of providing data. We actually have 68,388 people who live in the Launceston City Council municipal area. My calculator would not give me what percentage that was. This is 5 people making a contribution. But I guess when this item came to council, I was, when I spoke, and I think the deputy was the chair of that particular meeting, I did ask for those listening and others, and I know it was reported, for people to contact us with their ideas about the budget, because every year we do offer that opportunity to the community. And I do know from a workshop, a couple of workshops ago, officers shared with us the valuable contributions that people made in response to our budget through our Your Voice, Your Launceston and other avenues. So I was very appreciative of the many contributions that came through that. I guess for mine, Mr Mayor, and it does finish off in the report, it talks about when the budget will come to council. One of the things when you are invited to offer alternatives is exactly that. So if you think the budget does some things that you might not be too happy with, or there's fees or charges or rate rises that you don't agree with, it does give you that opportunity to perhaps highlight where that money could be better spent, or what we could do to increase the budget so that those increases are not as significant. So it is certainly, I look forward to dealing with the budget at our next council meeting, and I'm sure that there will be some of those 66,000 plus people waiting at their keyboards poised for the release of the budget to make their contribution. But I wanted to specifically single out and thank those individuals who did make a valuable contribution to this, and also to thank our officers for their reply and clarifying the issues that those residents and ratepayers made. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie has a question.
Yeah, my question was just in relation to submission 3, where there was a sought out to actually have some consultation. I think I've spoken to General Manager about going out and seeing the people at, I can't think what the address is now, Bardenhagen Road, yeah, about that. Has that been affected?
General Manager Everhart.
No, it hasn't been undertaken yet, but we are committed to doing that.
Thank you.
Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I do now. Thank you. Look, I guess we can be disheartened by only getting 5 responses to the budget. When I start really thinking about it, we go through a 12-month process of this. Tax ratepayers talk to us all the time about things we should or shouldn't be doing, and we feed that back through various processes by talking to officers, talking to the CEO, talking amongst ourselves in regards to things, and help us. I think over a full 12-month period, we actually get to hear about a lot of things that actually end up in the budget, or don't go in the budget because we don't think they should go in the budget. So I think that whilst there's 5 formal submissions here, I think probably of the 68,000, we probably don't get a huge percentage, but I think we are reliably informed on a daily basis by the interactions we as councillors have with the community in relation to things that they think are important to us. And I guess it's up to us to then represent that back to council through conversations we have at workshops and at council meetings. So I acknowledge and thank the people for the time and effort they put into place. Some of the people that I've read there perhaps have a different view about what council should be doing in regards to things, and I think our responses are appropriate. But somewhere along the line, we need to make sure that we go back and clarify with some of these people where they are perhaps a bit misguided on what our council funds should be used for, particularly where the roads and so forth are not actually belonging to us. We may well do that, but I guess we've got to continue to go back and consolidate that conversation with them so they fully understand and take acceptance as what they bought actually is on a road that we don't service, and therefore your responsibility. And we've probably got to continue to remind people of that, because I suspect they will always look back for somebody like us to actually fulfil that role.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. And briefly, I guess we should also remember that those submissions, those formal submissions, are also supplemented with the great innovative work that was undertaken through the consultation process online, where people had a proportion of dollars that they could then afford to certain projects and areas, which was really successful and captured great engagement from members of our community. So, you know, that idea that traditional capturing, Councillor Soward, of those 5 people was supplemented by the hundreds of people that took the opportunity to feed into the more innovative contemporary process as well.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other? I better put my mic on. A question from Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I noticed in submission 2 that the person is suggesting that their pensioner discount has varied between 14.15 and 15.25. What explains that variance? I thought it would have been a set amount in a discount. But...
Paul, are you going to answer that, or Nathan?
I think the thing, it just would depend on how their rates have moved in a particular time, I would have thought, because it's a set amount, like you say. It's, maybe that's the maths with changing valuations or something. It depends. You don't get a lot of detail of what they're actually talking about, what time periods.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other speakers? Oh.
I'll just speak briefly. Just that it's interesting that the few responses we did get seem to be on a particular 2 themes, which was, you know, road maintenance and pensioner discounts, ostensibly. That's not to say that there aren't other concerns, and as Deputy Mayor points out, there were other ways that people could interact with the process. When it comes to those roads, well, it's you know, it's a clear council position in terms of maintenance of some of these roads, and having had a look at those myself, you know, I can appreciate why people would sometimes think that you know, one road should get the same treatment as another, but there is such a variance within our municipality between the dead-end country lanes and the, you know, busier roads and things like that. It's good for us to be aware of it. You know, it's good for us to be aware of the impacts that increases can have on pensioners as well, and anything that we can do to alleviate that, I'm sure councillors would be keen to contribute to. But at the same time, you know, the council is working, you know, very hard to keep those increases to a minimum, and so you know, hopefully that you know, remains palatable for people who are struggling to pay their bills at the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Sauer, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 16.2, financial report to council. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Just got to look what those vibrant accountants have been doing. Look, lovely set of numbers, which is really pleasing when we've come off supporting ourselves through COVID and putting a lot back into the community through the COVID packages that we put in, that we've actually turned a result which is significantly improved on what we budgeted. So 6.6 million is a really good turnaround, and again, you know, we've got a ways to go yet to sort of get ourselves back into positive territory on an ongoing basis. But I just think what it really demonstrates is the vibrancy of the city. And how well the city's going with its you know, increasing rate base and things like that, which really show the growth, I think, in and around the city. I think the performance is there. And I guess the need for us to not actually have to be stimulating the economy, which we thought we might have had to do post the pandemic, because it's stimulating itself, which is terrific. The private enterprise is actually out there doing work that often falls on the hands of governments. So I think it's terrific, which I think is really saying that Launceston's in a pretty good space. So well done, everybody, and let's hope that 2023 turns out a result like this as well, because everybody's going to be looking at it.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, wish to add? Any other councillor? Councillor Walker.
Yes, and you know, quoting a former Prime Minister, and a Labor one at that, is probably appropriate for the times, Councillor Mackenzie. But I just wanted some further commentary, if I could, around that that turnaround and that variance that we're experiencing. Not that we can necessarily predict how that will go into the future, but nonetheless, are the indications that this change, I suppose, is the changes in people's behaviour, I suppose, at the moment is ongoing, and therefore that this underlying favourable variance will continue.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Oh, there's a question.
Sorry?
There's a half a question.
Oh, well, it's a statement, I thought, but anyway, you can answer the question. Go, Nathan.
So look, in terms of how we think we'll end this financial year, that was the question that I gleaned. Very hard to predict, but look, we are anticipating with the back pay component for the new enterprise agreement that we actually will wear that expense this financial year, which is pleasing, meaning we don't need to budget for it this year. As you can see in the report, we do have a favourable variance of around 3 million in our wages, so we can certainly accommodate that back pay in there. So look, we're still anticipating we will return an underlying surplus this year, yes.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 16.3, amendment to fees. Moved Councillor Harris. Seconded Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
I will briefly. This is a follow-up, motion following my previously successful motion to waive the development application fees for public art in the city. And this is now, the procedural amendment to allow that to occur so that they can then stop charging people who may put in a DA with a public art. So it's really just a procedural. I guess you could assign it a little bit like if a bill goes through state parliament to getting royal assent. So you could all think of it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and I commend, as I did at the time, Councillor Harris for bringing this forward, and very happy to support this. And I really hope that to read about this in the media tomorrow, because I have read online from some misinformed people in the community that this council doesn't support public art. So really, really timely that this is here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward, Councillor Harris wish to close. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Can somebody have a motion that we go into closed council? Move Councillor Soward, second Councillor Cox. All those in favour, please raise your hand and we'll go into closed council. Thank you. We're now going to closed council. Council. We're now back in open council. We have a motion. I think it's not on screen. I can't see the motion that's there. To endorse the decisions taken. Moved Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Harris. Yeah, I'm just waiting for that. So in case people never make assumptions. Have we got it there? It's thinking, the machine. Close council there with confirmation of the minutes. Okay, so we have mover Councillor Soward and seconder Councillor Harris. That the minutes from the closed, or the motion is the leave of absence was accepted. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. We'll close the meeting. Thank you.